Hey everyone, it's Silver here, and I think you're really going to like what I have for you today. It is an updated version of my Anointed Champion Cleric guide for Neverwinter. This guide is current through Module 15, which is Acquisitions Incorporated. And because Neverwinter is always receiving updates, it'll eventually become outdated, so if you're unsure of anything that I say, just check my MMO Minds guide because I keep that as updated as possible. And default disclaimer. All the relevant links and information that I mention in this video will be in the description, as well as timestamps for each specific section. So firstly, I should explain what role an Anointed Champion Cleric has in the party. Like, what do they do? Why should I make one? Well, AC Clerics primarily use specific encounter powers and at-will powers, and basically every power, to increase the damage and the power of the DPS in the group. And this makes the runs go a lot faster and smoother, so naturally they are very important and a really highly requested class. So the first thing you're going to need to know when you're making a cleric is which race to choose. It's the first thing on the screen. Race doesn't have a huge impact on performance at all, but the best races are just marginally better and are only important if you're interested in min-maxing your character to squeeze out as much power as you can. The races are primarily cosmetic, so just choose whatever looks the coolest to you since you're going to be staring at it for a really long time. I know you're expecting me to give you an answer for which race is the best, though. The best options have been the same for a really long time. Dragonborn is the best because you're able to choose both of your ability score bonuses, and so that would be Wisdom and Charisma for a cleric, and they also get 3% more base power, which is great, since base power is extremely important for AC. However, Dragonborn is a premium race, and not everyone can get access to that. So your second best option, and the option that I went with, is Sun Elf. In my opinion, Sun Elf is the best race for Cleric because you get bonus 2% action point gain. You don't get a bonus to your primary ability score, but I think the bonus action point gain makes up for that. If you don't want to be a Sun Elf, your third best option is just being a regular old human, because you get a +2 bonus to any one ability score, which you can pick Wisdom for that. And you also get 3 extra heroic feat points, which you can use to make up for the lack of other stuff that you have in your build. Next up is ability scores. As a cleric, your primary ability score is going to be Wisdom, and you're going to want to get that as high as possible whenever you're first creating your character by clicking reroll a bunch of times until you get as high as you can. Your secondary attribute is Charisma, and that contributes the most to your action point gain and recharge speed. And that's extremely important, so that one needs to be your second highest. As you level up your character, you're going to want to put all your points into Wisdom and Charisma, and the actual number of Wisdom that you have will vary depending on the gear you choose, and your race, and how high you roll the scores, but it doesn't matter a whole lot as long as you get it as high as you can. The stats that you're going to want to focus on the most as a cleric are Power, Recovery, and Critical Strike, in that order. You want to prioritize Power so that your power share number can be as high as possible, but you're going to want to stack Recovery as high as you can as well so that you can spam dailies and encounters as quickly as possible. You'll also want your critical chance to be as close to 100% as you can get it, but it's going to be a little difficult unless you have a ton of crit on your companion. In the enchantment slots on your character, not your companion, just your character specifically, you're going to want to put all Radiance in your offensive slots. And it's very important that you have Radiance here because that is the pure power enchantment, and like I said, you want to have a really high base power, so it's really important that you have these here. Your base power is the only power that is shared with the people in your party whenever you use power share abilities. So the power that you put on your companion is pretty much useless except for your own personal gain, so it's not really worth putting it there. And if you're looking to maximize your power share, you'll want to have Black Ice enchantments in your defense slots because of the insignia bonus Assassin's Covenant, which I will cover in the mount section. Utility slots don't matter as much. You can put refinement ones in there like Dragon Hordes, Quartermasters, or Fey Blessings or whatever, or you can just put Darks for higher movement speed, which is nice because being slow sucks. I have a lot of Darks in mind because I like movement speed. It makes me run a lot faster than I can in real life, and that gives me a false sense of security about myself. Don't judge. There are a lot of options for artifacts, but the important thing to note is the artifacts you choose must have power as their primary stat, so 1000 power on it. The secondary stats that are helpful are recovery, critical strike, armor penetration, or action point gain. And once you get your cleric to level 60, make sure you do the Vault of the Nine quest to get the Sigil of the Devoted, and this artifact is extremely helpful, especially whenever you don't have recovery stacked up as high as you need it, and it completely fills your action points over 15 seconds, which is really helpful for spamming Anointed Army. Some other great artifact options are the Fragmented Key of Stars, the Symbol of Fire, the Sigil of the Controller, Eye of the Giant, and the Empowered Illusionist Mask from the Masquerade of Liars event, if you were able to participate in that. For a full list of the helpful artifacts and all the stats on them, and their effects, please check my MMO Minds guide. Neverwinter has a pretty small selection of support-based companions, which those are the ones that increase your outgoing, incoming healing, and etc. But that isn't a huge deal because it's more worth it to focus on companions that increase your personal stats anyway. As my summon companion, I use a Con Artist. Con Artist is really easy to get. It costs 2 gold in Protector's Enclave. It has 3 ring slots, so it's really easy to gear up, and has 2 offensive bonding slots. Of course, 3 offensive bonding slots would be better, but like I said, the power that you would get from it isn't shared with your group anyway, so it's such a small difference that it doesn't really make a huge difference. That was a really English sentence. Yup. The other important thing to note about this companion is that it has an attack that has a 10% debuff on it once you get it to blue rank or higher. So it's going to be really important that you upgrade it as quickly as possible. The Sellsword and the Cholton Tiger also have this same bonus, so those are the other 2 best companions to choose for summoned. However, they're not as easy to gear. The other companions I use are the Deep Crow Hatchling because it has an active bonus of 1500 power. And that's great, just free power that you can feed off of. And this is a new companion in Module 15, so you console people, make sure you try and get your hands on one of these. Wait a couple weeks though, because the price will go down. I also use 2 Archons, the Earth Archon and the Air Archon. The Earth Archon I chose because it gives me 6% bonus damage when I'm at full health. And at this point, I'm pretty much either at full health or dead. And the Air Archon is 5% bonus damage against enemies not at full health. So basically every hit except the first one, which is helpful. Now you're asking me, why do I have damage companions on an AC Cleric? And my answer is just going to be to you, why not? They're a lot more beneficial than the support companions that I mentioned before. I'm not a DPS build, but you can't argue that more damage is not helpful. It's really helpful for solo content, and it makes you have more of an impact instead of just tickling things when you're in a party. Alrighty, next up is mounts. So the best legendary combat power that you can choose is, in my opinion, the T-Rex, because it gives them a 10% debuff similar to the companions that I just mentioned, and it also stacks. So if you have a bunch of people in the party using a T-Rex, you can get 10, 30, 40% bonus damage against them, or rather, they'll have that much less defense. It also eats things, so you can't really complain about that. And as far as the equip bonus goes, the equip power, you'll want to ideally have something with 4000 base power. But if you don't have that, like the T-Rex power is just as good, 2000 power, 2000 armor penetration. And if you can't get either a legendary mount, try to get a purple one that has the 2000 power. These are the 5 best insignia bonuses to go for. Artificer's Persuasion is something that I just started using recently. I always thought I had enough recovery, but I mean, you can never really have enough. So what this does is whenever you use your artifact, your recovery, movement, action point gain, and stamina gain are increased by 10% of your power for 15 seconds. So basically, you get a ton of extra recovery, movement, and action point gain. And that makes it a lot easier to spam dailies during that time. Next, Gladiator's Guile. Whenever your stamina is above 75%, you move 15% faster. So, I don't know about you, but I like running fast. I played Sonic a lot as a kid, and being slow just sucks now. Thirdly, Protector's Camaraderie. Whenever your summoned companion attacks, you gain 3% of your own power and defense for 10 seconds. So it's, again, that's just more power for you. And you can, if you wanted to, you could stack this with the 2 Insignia, 1 Protector's Friendship for a total of 5%, because that one has 2%, to 3% from Camaraderie and 2% from Protector's Friendship, but I don't do that because I like to use all different bonuses. Next is Assassin's Covenant. This one is probably one of the most important ones. You lose 10% of your defense, deflection, and lifesteal, and gain the combination of the lost stats as power. Now, this goes back to why I said you should choose Black Ice for your defense slots. It has defense, deflection, and lifesteal as the stats. And if you add all those up, you get a number, and I'm really bad at mental math, but something like 1,400 total stat points on the Black Ice. Whereas if you had something like a single stat enchantment like an Azure, you would only have 1,000 stat points. And so you would get an extra 40 base power per enchantment. I'm sorry if that's a little bit confusing. I'll put something on the screen to explain it, so it makes more sense. A lot of people ask me if this stacks Assassin's Covenant. It does, but it's not really worth stacking because of all these other awesome bonuses that you could use. It does stack, but it's not it won't be 20%. It stacks with diminishing returns, and considering the numbers to your base power are already pretty small per enchantment, having more even smaller bonuses aren't going to make that much of a difference. And lastly, we've got Shepherd's Devotion. When you use a daily power, your teammates' defense, deflection, and movement are increased by 5% of your power for 10 seconds. Now this one can be really annoying if you're running Cradle, or anything where movement speed can make you just run right off the side of the map. I've gotten really used to it, but if you're not used to having like 40k movement or higher than that, it's going to be really hard to adjust to, and you'll probably just fly off the map like you got shot from a catapult or something. Another one here that I don't use is Cavalry's Warning, and that one gives you 10% bonus to pretty much every single offensive stat whenever you use a mount combat power, so it's only useful if you have a legendary mount. And even then, only 10 seconds of bonus stats means that it's possible that you might not even get that in very much of your power share, so it's better to have guaranteed bonuses than ones that are only going to be there for a few seconds. When it comes to gear, the majority of what you want is going to come from Castle Ravenloft or Barovian Hunts. My head, my chest, and my feet all come from Castle Ravenloft Seals of the Crown. And I chose these because of their equip bonuses. Whenever you choose gear, you don't really want to look at item level, more so the stats that are on it. Make sure there's power on all of your pieces, and make sure the equip bonuses don't suck. So in this case, I get 1500 crit whenever my health is 50%, 1500 power when my health is over 50%, and 1500 recovery when my health is over 50%. And like I said before, if I'm either at full health or dead, so that bonus is pretty much up all the time. And the Executioner's Braces. This is going to be probably your most difficult piece to get, not because it's hard, but because it's RNG based. This drops from hunts, and there's a chance that it drops from Castle Ravenloft, but there's no guaranteed way to get it. And the reason it's so good is because it has 3200 base power on it. Put your 200 power reinforcement kit on it, and that's 3400, almost 3500 base power on just one piece, which is really great. The new armor in Mod 15 really sucks, so I don't plan on getting any of it. The stats are very slightly better, but the equip bonuses are just really bad compared to the ones on the Castle Ravenloft armor. The only good one is the helmet. When you kill an enemy, your damage increases by 5% for 5 seconds, which would be good for DPS classes versus trash mobs. But the rest of them, you get a little bit more stats, a little bit more hit points, but then you get a flying sword to fight for you versus 1500 recovery. Obviously the pick is the 1500 recovery. For rings, beaded restoration rings pretty much all the way, unless you can get a Grave Striker +4 or +5, which I actually have one, but I already had these rings and didn't feel like changing it, so I'm not using it. If I got a +5 Grave Striker, I would definitely swap out one of these for that, for an extra 1000 power. And then your best neck and waist are the fanged beaded stuff, or the beaded in the Sash's case, which is masterwork crafted armor that you'll have to buy on the auction house. Now, it's not exactly cheap. I traded for mine, so I didn't even buy it. But it's about 1.3 mil for each piece. And the reason it's so good is it doesn't take up an artifact slot, so you can have whatever 4 artifacts you want. And whenever you use encounter powers, you get 500 recovery that stacks up to 3 times. So basically 1500 recovery, since you're going to be spamming encounters the entire fight. And the primary stat on these things is both power, so it's a lot of power on there, bonus charisma on the belt. The best shirt is still the shirt of the Cholton Merchant from Merchant Prince's Folly, just because of the recovery that you get on it. Now for pants, these are not the best pants, but they are the second best pants. The best pants are Celeste's pants, I think, or no, Makos's travel pants from the Many Coins Bank Heist. The equip bonus on them is 1000 power at the beginning of combat, so that will be included in your base power share. When it comes to the stats that you put on your companion is where you want to put all of your crit, all of your armor penetration, and all of your recovery. Putting power on there is not really helpful, because, like I said before, it doesn't get shared to your group. So you'll want to have crit, armor penetration, and recovery on your companion, and with your bonding runestones, it will get shared to you, and it will make you do a lot better. As far as boons go, of course, you're going to want to take the power boon from the stronghold. Pretty much just take all of the offensive, all the power-related boons, all the recovery boons, basically the boons that increase the stats that you need. And I have all these listed on my guide. I'm not going to go through all of these because this video is already long enough, and I'm sure you're all already tired of listening to me talk by now. I'm already starting to lose my voice, and I'm not even halfway done, but it's cool. It's cool, it's fine. You can tell I don't talk this much normally. Other than the powers that you use, the build itself is obviously the most important part of the Cleric. So I am going to go through these in detail and explain why I chose these things. So it's going to be pretty long. I have changed these quite a few times since my last AC video. Healing action, in my case I'll gain 4% more action points whenever you use a healing ability. So this is basically Divine Glow, you'll get 4% more action points whenever you use it. Then I've got Toughness here, which is basically a given on every class. You want as much hit points as possible, partially because of Aura of Courage that a Paladin has, but also just because more hit points is great because you'll die slower. Next up we've got Domain Synergy, 5% more recovery. Nothing to complain about here, more recovery is great. And you're going to want as much of it as possible anyway, so might as well take it. Then, Repurposed Soul. When one of your spells has a critical effect, the target of that spell disperses a small area effect heal, healing you and your allies for 15% of the spell's effect. So, the higher your crit chance is, the more Repurposed Souls that are going to proc and the more healing you're going to get. Now, as a AC, healing isn't the primary focus, but it is also your job. So having this passive heal is really useful. And lastly, Bountiful Fortune. Gain 20% more divine power. This was buffed in mod 15, it makes it really great. I took my points that I had in Cleanse, and I put them in here so that I would get my divinity faster, and so far it's been really nice. Now, I have noticed the slight difficulty increase without Cleanse, and people always complain about Cleanse, mainly Guardian Fighters, because they use the Survivor's wraps, and that cleanses the dot off of those. But in places like Tomb of the Nine Gods, with the fire dots, I have noticed it's been more of a challenge to stay alive, personally, since Cleanse would usually take that effect right away. But I am going to keep them in this Bountiful Fortune just because getting divinity faster and spamming those encounters, that empowered stuff, is what's important and what people want from you. And we got 3 in the Virtuous Tree. This is just a placeholder. 10% base more healing, which is great. And then this is a really important feat, Battle Fervor. Blessing of Battles buff now also increases the target's power by 15% of your power. Now this is one of those tooltips that is confusing and doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So Blessing of Battle is an area of effect type of power. You attack it on one enemy, and then everyone in the radius of that enemy gets the power bonus. They'll have the little marker here on your buff bar to show that they have it. But the tooltip says that it increases the affected target's power. So I've had a lot of people ask me, well, how do you target this power? What does that mean? But you don't target it. It was written differently. If it was TARGETS apostrophe, it increases all the target's power by 15%. That would make a little more sense, but I think it could be reworded. Gift of Haste. Your heal over time powers also grants the target 5% of their action points over 5 seconds. Now this is great because spamming dailies is things a lot of classes do, a lot of people do, and it's also really fun you get to spam Divine Glow on them with a purpose. And I've used this to fill up people's action points before boss fights and to just keep them topped off during the fight itself. And everything else is in Righteous. Righteous is the best feat tree for Cleric. It's the one that you'll take if you're playing DPS, it's the one that you'll take if you're playing a buffer. The only time you wouldn't take is if you're trying to do some sort of Virtuous or Gift of Faith type of build, which I have done before. That was my very, very first Cleric build, and I'm never going back to that. I didn't really like it. 10% more action points when dealing damage. Yes, please. More action points. Give me all the action points. And when the Anointed Army daily buff ends, you get healed and 5% of their total action points. Woo! Weapons of Light. Allies within 30 feet get 10% of your power. This is a passive thing, and it's a really awesome feat. It does not stack, so having 2 clerics in your party with it is pretty counterproductive. It'll only give them the highest value between the two. Bear Your Sins and Condemning Gaze. Bear Your Sins. Foes who are under the effect of one of your damage over time effects take 10% more damage from all sources. This is a damage over time. Break the Spirit is one of your damage over times. And lastly, your damaging encounter powers apply a stack of Condemned to affected and the nearby targets for 30 seconds, and once they reach 5 stacks of Condemned, they take 15% more damage from all sources. So you're making the targets take more damage from the rest of your group, which is great. These also don't stack. In Mod 15, it's a lot more common to only have 1 DC in a dungeon party, so you really won't have to worry about this as much. Last but certainly not least, Avatar of the Divine. This power was changed in Module 15. If you want to see all the changes that happen to clerics in Mod 15, there's a little button at the top right that you can click on to have a link to my video where I explain everything. But you get Avatar for 20 seconds whenever you enter combat, and you also gain this effect every 45 seconds in combat. This increases your damage by 50%, divinity generation by 25%, and cooldown speed by 25%. So basically some free recharge speed, free divinity to help you charge up your empowered powers faster, and more damage, because why not? Also, casting encounters reduces the cooldown by 1.5 seconds for each stack of empowered that's consumed, which is a good way to reduce the cooldown of this. So that's all the feats for Cleric. Right now, I'm thinking this is going to be my final feats until Mod 16. So, yeah. And the last section I have to talk about is powers. There's a pretty decent number of powers that you can choose from, but the ones that you're going to be using the most for at-wills are Blessings of Battle for the Battle Fervor feat that I just explained. And I keep Astral Seal on my right click, though I don't really use it as much because it messes up my divinity generation by making it uneven. But it's a good way to help heal if it's a passive lifesteal type healing, fake lifesteal for your allies. Basically, you put a mark on them, and then for the next 9 seconds, whenever you or an ally damage the target, you're healed. It makes it seem like you are healed whenever somebody is damaging them, but it says this effect may occur once every 4 seconds per ally. So the allies are included in this. They will get healed once per 4 seconds. That is something that I have been asked and asked to clarify. This is another example of one of those tooltips that could be worded a little bit better. For your passives, Holy Fervor, you can switch out Holy Fervor if you think you have enough action point gain to keep up everything 100%. I still use it because I really like action point gain. That's pretty much it. I love having the bonus action point gain. If you wanted to switch it out with something, I would suggest Divine Fortune, because that's an extra 35% divinity gain. Or if you're having trouble surviving, Anointed Armor. Plus 16 armor class and 8% deflection chance. But the most important one here is Hastening Light. Whenever you activate a daily power, it recharges everybody's cooldowns by 3 seconds per daily. Daily powers. The single most important one, the one you're going to be spamming all the time, is Anointed Army. That's the one that gives you the 4 little orbs that float around your character that absorb some damage. It increases the target's power by 33% of your power. So this is where base power comes into play again. The higher that number is, the higher the power that'll be shared to everybody else is. And the more damage they'll deal and the faster the enemies will die, and so on and so forth. The other daily that you could use is Hallowed Ground. This gives you a 35% damage buff and damage resistance buff. The third option is Divine Armor. I don't use this one very often anymore, but it is something that I have used a lot in the past in specific situations. It grants allies at the target location 80% of their hit points as temporary hit points. Now this is something that you could use in situations where there is damage over time, or a bunch of small hits that would eat up the orbs from Anointed Army really quickly. Instead you could give them some hit points and that would actually be more beneficial. And lastly, encounters. Nowadays I do not use Forge Master's Flame anymore because the damage bonus from it was removed completely, which sucks because I always felt super badass whenever I was using this power, but oh well. Instead of that I use Break the Spirit, which is bonus 21% damage if it's fully empowered. Next up, the most important encounter, Exaltation. Well, I should say the second most important encounter, but Exaltation gives a bunch of bonus damage to the target person. There is a keybind for this to make your life a lot easier since it's initially a targeted power. It targets yourself and one ally that you're mousing over. The useful keybind, it will be in the description, where instead of having to aim and try to follow somebody around in combat, you can just hit a button and it would automatically put the Exaltation buff on them. Lastly, the actual most important, most awesomest encounter power is Divine Glow. It does everything. It damages, it gives a damage buff, it gives a damage resistance buff, and it heals. So that's like a 4-in-1 right there. This is all around the best power ever. It's really great for annoying people too, so that basically makes it a 5-in-1. Now this is something that a lot of people have been asking me about pretty much since the dawn of time. What is my rotation in combat? What do I use? How do I make all this work? The first thing when you get in combat, you're going to want to cast Anointed Army on your party members and then immediately use Blessings of Battle. That's all your power share stuff, apart from Exaltation, which is the next thing you're going to want to get going. But you want to have those effects on your party before their bondings proc, because you're power sharing to their companions, and then their companions will then give all of their stats to you. So you want to have their companion stats be as high as possible to then make their stats as high as possible. And bondings only refresh every 30 seconds, so it is important that you get this done at the beginning of combat because you won't have very many opportunities to do it again. After you cast Blessings of Battle, do it repeatedly until your divinity is full, though it is important that you try to keep your divinity full at the end of combat so that the next time you enter combat it's already full and already ready to go. But next up I do 1 Divinity Divine Glow, that's an extra 5% damage for the party, and then I do 2 quick Divinity Break the Spirits, and then an Empowered Exaltation, followed by an Empowered Break the Spirit, which did not work in this case. Something that I have noticed is that it is possible to keep Break the Spirit and Exaltation empowered at the same time. It just takes really quick reaction times. People used to do this a lot with Forge Masters. They would cast Empowered Forge Masters, and before the animation completed, they would cast Exaltation, and you would get both empowered at the same time. And this is the same concept here. It's just a much faster reaction time that you need. There, as you can see, I've got both the Empowered Exaltation and the Empowered Break the Spirit there in my buff bar. So it is possible to keep them both up at the same time. It just takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of timing, and then you'll be able to keep them both up and your party will be like, whoa. Anyways, after you empower them both, you'll be able to cast another daily at this point, and then fill up your divinity with Blessings of Battle or add an Astral Seal if you think they need it, and then just repeat the same thing again. And that's pretty much it. Throw in a mount power or an artifact if you feel like it's necessary. But other than that, it's pretty much it. It's a lot simpler than before if you've got the keybind going on. Alright everyone, that's pretty much it for my Mod 15 AC Cleric guide. I hope it was informative and I hope you learned something from it. I didn't really script it out as much as I usually script out my videos, but lately what I've been doing is just pulling the stuff out of the top of my head, and the videos have been turning out better, so I thought, well, might as well try it for this too. If I forgot anything, feel free to yell at me in the comments, or just ask me in the comments and I'll answer it for you. I know I did not cover weapon and armor enhancements, but apart from that, I think I covered everything else. And again, everything is on my guide as well on MMO Minds. The link to that's going to be in the description, as well as the insignia bonuses guide and probably some other stuff too. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you thought this was helpful. I'm trying to post videos regularly this year. This was my resolution to do better on YouTube, and so there's going to be regular videos, patch note videos, guides, and so on and so forth. And that's it. Bye.